It wasn't the usual outback tourism experience. Earlier this year, on a former sheep station in Western Australia's Murchison region, 300 kilometres inland from Geraldton, these two dingoes called Eulalia and Steve were kept as pets.
The message that they help us tell is incredibly important, and they're just lovely to hang out with, so yeah.
David Pollock is on a mission to share his views on the environmental benefits of having free-roaming dingoes on his pastoral property, Woorleen, a 150,000 hectare former sheep station, now a cattle property with a booming station stay tourism business.
The dingo is the silver bullet, I think, for fixing this country, if there is one. They just do it themselves. All you have to do is not kill them. Like, that's it.
David Pollock believes dingoes are a natural fit in his journey to restore the landscape at Woorleen after years of environmental damage from overstocking. Dingoes live wild on the property and act as an apex predator, killing kangaroos and goats, which David believes eat significant amounts of plants and shrubs. Last year, he brought 2 hand-raised young dingoes into WA from Victoria so that visitors to Woorleen could touch and interact with the dingoes, something that's not possible with the wild dingoes living on the property. The pet dingo's main handler was former Australian Dingo Foundation volunteer and PhD student Zali Jestrimsky.
So dingoes have been able to come back into this region in the early 2000s, and they've come back through the whole region. Even though we have baiting here, we still have wild dingoes out here. Woorleen Station itself doesn't bait, which is a very controversial thing because the neighbours are pretty upset that, we don't kill dingoes on this property.
The Murchison region was once famous for its wool production, but about 20 years ago, increasing amounts of dog attacks on stock and poor wool prices decimated the sheep industry. David Pollock does concede dingoes cannot coexist with sheep, but he says most properties in the region now run cattle, which he believes are largely unaffected by dingoes. 120 kilometres down the road from Woorleen, Ewan Station is one of the last properties in the Murchison with sheep.
On Ewan, we won't make much of a quid out of cattle, in my opinion, at all. And sheep also get a very bad rap about what they do to the country, and cattle are the answer because, they don't hurt the country as much as sheep and so on. Bullshit. Bullshit. Animals don't hurt the country so much as the managers who have too many of them or don't manage them properly.
3 generations of the Foulkes-Taylor family have grazed sheep in the Murchison, from shearing about 18,000 merinos. Today, Roscoe and Emma are down to about 500 Dorper meat sheep.
We spent around 600,000 plus over several years putting a 160-kilometre fence, dog-resistant fence around our property.
They don't believe the vegetation on their property is suitable for cattle production. And while their fence offers some protection for their sheep, most of their income now comes from their businesses outside of the station, like concreting and machinery contracting. So how do stations in the same small shire coexist with such different thoughts around dogs in the landscape? Roscoe and David do not share a boundary fence, but they agreed to meet for a yarn over a kombucha.
We coexist well if those doing their operation on their individual places give due regard for those around them.
And what do you reckon, Dave, in terms of that philosophy of what you do on your place is your business, but you should keep it on your property?
Yes, in far as Roscoe's putting it out there, absolutely. I guess my only wish is that we'd have a bit more of a conversation about it, I guess. That it was easier to have a conversation about it. And I recognise that anything that's going to be a motive, there's impediments to doing that, for sure. I would wish is that we were able to have the conversation a bit more freely, I guess.
What do you think the impediment is?
The impediment to having the conversation?
Well, he said emotion, which is fair enough. People get very wound up.
Yeah.
They used to about goats, and they will about dogs.
Yeah. Do you understand that, though, as someone who you've got sheep and you're trying to protect them?
Yes. To a degree, I think the hysteria is way over the top. about, who's doing what and what I'm going to do, and the reality of someone walking up to David and then having a discussion about it rationally doesn't exist enough. People hate that.
The culture out here is that dingoes are the worst thing, and everybody used to have sheep. But fair enough, because they'll kill all your sheep out here. So dingoes have come into the district. Most people have got out of sheep, it's just been too hard. People have gone to cattle. And from my perspective, your dingoes are great at managing kangaroo and goat population, which is something that we could never manage before. And they kind of did it for free.
There's several dogs on Ewan now. We know that. We try and kid ourselves we know how many. We probably don't. It'll be within about 2 or 6 or 7. Fine. They're doing their thing, we're doing ours. We'll knock a few off if we can, and if they turn up where we don't want them. If they do their thing, we'll leave them to it. Yes, we will bait for pups and so on. We don't want to get overrun. But as I've also said, when we fenced Ewan off, we're 120 dogs in the first few years. We took off Ewan, far too many.
As a pastoralist, you kind of assume you have to regulate the numbers of most things, or at least try to do what you can. Our experience is that dingoes are very good at maintaining their own numbers. And I actually think I believe that the numbers have come up and come back down a bit. But,
is the mission to romanticise them, or is it to educate?
Absolutely not, no. So the mission is to debunk the myths, one of which, the one that I would like to debunk the most, is that they're not dingoes. I mean, a lot of people would say that the animals running around here are not dingoes. I think the term wild dog has been created essentially so that we can use public funds to kill a native animal.
Under WA's Biosecurity and Agricultural Management Act, wild dogs are declared pests and pastoralists are meant to control declared pests on their lands. So what is the difference between a wild dog and a dingo?
So we use wild dogs as a collective term, and it means dingoes, free-roaming dogs and their hybrids. They are all one species, Canis familiaris.
And it doesn't matter about the genetic composition of the individual animal, they're just considered a wild dog?
Yes. Yep. Purity varies within the population, but WA has the highest purity after the Northern Territory across Australia, but no, the purity doesn't matter.
The state's policy for wild dog management is to control all wild dogs, including dingoes, in and near livestock grazing areas. Landowners are given a range of management tools. Some are lethal, some are not. Under WA's Biodiversity and Conservation Act, dingoes are considered native wildlife but are not protected. Tracy Kreplin studied the DNA of more than 1,200 dogs killed over the past 11 years in a 6.5 million hectare vermin-proof cell in pastoral country.
So over those time periods, we looked at how dingo purity changed over time, particularly in this area, because there's been a lot of lethal control for decades and decades and decades and decades, because it was historically a huge sheep-producing area. And what we found was that no genetic marker for dingo purity changed over those 11 years. So lethal control didn't impact dingo purity within that area.
Do you find that this subject, dog control, lethal control or not, and just the presence of dogs in this landscape, really emotive from the conversations that you have?
It's the most emotive species I've ever worked on, and there's so many polarising discussions, ideas, ways to manage the land. Yeah, it's a really interesting and challenging species to work on for sure.
To film this story, we visited Woolleen earlier this year. But in late September, Wooleen's 2 pet dingoes went missing. They were let out for their daily walk and have not returned to this enclosure. David believes they were shot. So you found the bullets and the bullet casings on the ground?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then it's a pretty simple task to follow the drag marks. I mean, it's rain, but this little plant here was covered in blood that had been dragged over there, but that's all washed off with the rain. Mm-hmm. And the bloodstains are still under this tree. That's what's left of them, and their bodies were taken away.
In response to the shooting, Woolleen launched a petition on its social media, attempting to pressure the Murchison Shire to scrap its long-standing wild dog bounty, which pays $100 per scalp for wild dogs, provided the shooter has written consent from the property owner and proof of where they were shot. The petition has attracted more than 15,000 signatures, but it's caused a rift in the Murchison community. Woolleen did not contact the Murchison Shire to request the bounty be scrapped before launching the petition. Shire President Roscoe Foulkes-Taylor feels Woolleen is attempting to use global pressure to strong-arm change to local policy.
And that's the irony. We have, been, as a Shire, been really supportive of Woolleen and positive. I've never bagged him to others or the Woolleen process to others. I've said that is their choice. We have one entity in the Shire that actively encourages dingoes to proliferate and go about their business unhindered. We have a dozen or two other businesses trying to grow food from this region, which don't want that to happen.
Roscoe Foulkes-Taylor has received messages of support from local pastoralists for the bounty to continue, but he's also receiving hate messaging from across the world.
If someone from Las Vegas tells me, or anywhere, even the other end of Perth, tells me that, you know, if they rationally say, look, we don't support it and we wish you wouldn't do it, fine. If they let rip, which they are a fair bit, well, I don't really take notice of that, but yeah, we'll consider everything. But why are the 4 or 5 properties around, why are their businesses less important than Woolleen? They aren't.
At the end of the day, the people that will be changing the Murchison's wild dog bounty, whether we have a wild dog bounty or not, are those councillors. So if there is people that are saying, you know, you should be doing something different, you should be stopping that bounty, well, I agree, they should be.
There's a difference, though, isn't there, between you should do this and a personal, very personal comments?
Well, I'm not sending those comments. I can't take responsibility for the internet.
Further north, dingoes are prevalent in the Pilbara and Gascoyne, pastoral country where sheep once grazed, but cattle are now the dominant livestock industry. Hamish McTaggart's father transitioned from sheep to cattle at Bidgymire Station 30 years ago, a move driven by poor sheep and wool prices and dog attacks.
There'd be 4,000 or 5,000 calves a year born on Bidgymire, and if we find 1 or 2 or 3 that have got any dog tracks on them, bites, cuts, bruises, that would be about it. So that's where we want it to. That's great. If you let the dingo problem just run rife, I don't think it's a big stretch to say that 5, 10, 15% of your calves would be knocked around by dogs year on year. So it makes an enormous difference to the business. And if you're an animal lover and you love your cattle, you just don't want to see your animals torn to shreds by wild dogs there.
Hamish does not agree with the theory that dingoes will self-regulate their numbers, and he continues to bait and trap them to protect his calves. But he does see benefit in having a small amount in the landscape to keep kangaroo numbers down.
It's a very, very fine balance. We're in like the perfect little ecosystem at the moment where we try really hard to get the dogs. And you know, we would need to continue to do that. We don't have any calf damage, and there's not many roos or few roos.
In some parts of WA, wild dogs associate people with food scraps. There's already been numerous accounts of people being bitten by dogs, and some say it's only a matter of time until someone is attacked and killed.
Trish Grinham has spent most of her life in the bush. She broke her leg a while ago, and part of her recovery is to walk 6 kilometres every day on her station near Yalgoo, the next shire east of the Murchison. A few weeks ago, Trish was walking through her horse paddock with her 2 pet dogs when a wild dog approached, growling with its hackles raised. It came within about 5 metres of her.
Quietly turned around and tried not to panic and started slowly walking for home. But it kept following, and I had my 2 dogs were right beside my legs, and as soon as the black and white one would stop and start growling, I knew this dog was coming back in. So I'd turn around again and do the yell at it, and it'd stop. And then that did it 3 times before I got back to the mill.
She hasn't walked through the horse paddock since.
In this last week, the dogs have killed 18 sheep.
This week?
Yep. I tracked them all up on the motorbike, and it looks like we think about 3 dogs or more. They're holding the mob up, killing, and then following them. And the sheep were virtually in a line about half a k apart.
WA is divided into 14 biosecurity groups. They're led by farmers and pastoralists and are responsible for pest and land management using some government funding. For some, the 1,200 kilometre vermin-proof state barrier fence, which roughly divides pastoral and grain-growing land, is an essential tool to stop the movement of dogs southwest. Sheep farmer Chris Patmore's zone covers 22,000 square kilometres of land next to the state barrier fence, including some land kept for conservation. Farming much closer to the coast, he's a long way from the Murchison, but he believes dogs are flowing into his region from the northern pastoral areas.
The only way we can operate as farmers is with a nil tenure approach to wild dogs. We just can't have them anywhere near our stock because it's the first thing they'll attack. And some of the images of the stock attacks are quite gruesome. I think that if we could eradicate dogs, I think we would have done it by now, and we certainly haven't done that. But we've still got to keep working on it, because if we don't, the dogs will be right through the Southwest Land Division before very long at all, and the sheep industry will be wiped out. There's no doubt about that.
You see yourself as the final frontier?
Yep.
The debate over the presence of an apex predator in Australia's farming regions for now looks likely to remain a complex and divisive issue, with no clear path for the balance between conserving a native animal and sustainable protein production.